I do still hear you, but I don't see the picture yet. Yes, we are live. It says on the bottom of our screen.
Great.
Tervetuloa tosiaan tähän webinaariin. Onko meitä täällä kuuntelemassa ketään tällä hetkellä? Siellä näyttää olevan lukuisa joukko jo kuuntelijoitakin. Welcome to our webinar and welcome also our distinguished guests, Kjetil and Line from our Norwegian office from Oslo. Did I say the names a bit correctly? No. But what we are going to hear today is about the Norwegian elections that were just last week. So take it away, Kjetil and Line.
We will. Here we are. Okay, so hello everyone. Good morning in Finland. It's great to be able to do this. We love Finland, and we're so interested in Finnish politics. So it's fun to see that there are other people who are interested in Norway as well. My name is Lina. I have been a political advisor in the previous Labour-led government for the Minister of Defense, and I also worked in Parliament, etc. And today I work at Rud Pedersen in Oslo. And with me I have Kjetil. Say who you are, Kjetil.
I'm here.
And who are you?
I'm a partner at Rud Pedersen in Oslo, and I was Deputy Foreign Minister during the last Red-Green government. And I've also held a few managerial positions in various Norwegian ministries. Right.
Very good.
So, Lina, will you now start and take us through the first part of our analysis?
Yes. So you can just go. So we'll start just with going straight on to give you the highlights of the election. So basically, after 8 years with a center-right government, Norway now has taken a large step to the left. So this red-green bloc, the center-left, has won by a solid margin. So Erna Solberg, who has been the prime minister for 8 years, she is now gone, and there is going to be a new government, probably consisting of Labour Party, who's the biggest party, the Centre Party, and the Socialist Left Party, and headed by Jonas Gahr Støre. So I think we can move to the next slide, Kjetil, and I can go more in detail on the different parties. So here you see the strongest color are the results from this election, and the weak color behind is the 2017 election, so the last national elections. And as you can see, the Labour Party is the biggest party. They actually went a little bit down from 27% from the last election. Yet, and this is interesting, they are perceived as one of the clear winners. And this is partly due to them having being much lower in the polls for a very long time. So you can also see that the party on the right side, which is the Conservative Party, Høyre, is the second largest party, but they have gone down a lot. So they are now at 20.5%. Another interesting factor that we have seen in Norway for a long time now is that the Centre Party, it says SP, just next to Labour Party, which is AP. They are, perfect, Kjetil. They are at 13.6%. So they had a major major increase. And they have been actually among the biggest parties in the polls for a very long time. So they were among 16 to 20% in the polls. So they went down. So even though they made the biggest increase from the last elections, they were not perceived as such a winner because of that. So And two other interesting factors I'd like to highlight is that the party you see on the very left side, just as an R, it's the Red Party. This is a communist party, and they have also had a major increase. So they're on 4.7%, but because of Norway, we have a threshold of 4%. And if a party goes on 4% and above, they get a lot of extra mandates, even though they're not that big. So the Red Party goes from having one person in parliament to now have a group consisting of around 8 people. So that is, and of course they are on the very left side. So they are going to pressure even the red green parties, meaning Socialist Left, Labour, and Centre Party, and always have someone who are kind of more forward or more pushing even more than they are. So that's going to be a challenge for the new government. And also we can see that on the very right side, FRP, which is the Progress Party, comparable to the Sanfinna party in Finland, they have decreased quite a bit since the previous elections, but that has been the tendency kind of for a long time, so that was not a surprise. Just lastly, the party called MDG, that's the Green Party. For many of us, it was a surprise that they didn't make the threshold of 4%, that they were smaller than anticipated due to the polls, because everyone thought that after the United Nations reports on climate change, everyone thought that, okay, it's a climate election, right? So, but it didn't turn out. So we're going to come back to that and explain a little bit why that happened and why these other things happened as well. So you can go to the next slide, Kjetil. Yeah. So this shows a distribution of mandates in parliament. We have 169 seats in parliament in total, and you see that the Labour Party, they have now 48 mandates, gone down from 49. The Conservative Party, Høyre, that's why it's an H, they have now 36, and the Centre Party have 28, so that's 9 more. So that's a big increase. So they are going to be powerful in parliament and probably in government as well. I think we can continue. Yeah, so this just shows that in Norway, to form a government, you need a majority of 85. And actually, this coalition, or the red green, so the center-left parties, in total made 100. And just the Socialist Left, the Labour Party, and the Centre Party, who are now trying to see if they can form a government, let's put it like that, they even got 89 mandates. So it was a really clear majority for them. So it means that the center-right parties really had a good, was a really clear majority. Oh, the sound came back a little bit. Okay, Kjetil, you can move to the next. And we give it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lina. So, what were the main topics of the election in Norway? Affluent...
And we give it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lina. So, what were the main topics of the election in Norway? Affluent...
And we give it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lina. Sorry, hello? What were the main topics of the election in Norway? Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now? Lina, can you hear me?
I hear you. It seems to be some problems with the audio, but let's...
Yeah, I'll just go on. If the problems proceed, we might need some assistance. But anyway, so what were the main topics of the election? I think we can point at three topics. One is social inequality. The second one is environment and the climate change. And the third one is what we've termed regionalism. And that is the challenge tied to center versus periphery, or the countryside versus the cities. Now, this might sound like a surprise, but in a very affluent and rich society like the Norwegian one, which has fared very well throughout the pandemics due to the Norwegian oil fund, which has been a source to even out all the negative effects of the pandemics, the socialist parties have still succeeded in highlighting a growing tendency of social inequality in Norway, and has obviously succeeded in tying this development to the policies of the Solberg government. Then secondly, we have the UN climate report that Line mentioned, which led to an even more increased attention to climate change. Now, there was an expectation that this would lead to the Green Party, the MDG, having a huge surge towards the end of the election campaign. However, this did not happen. The Green Party made a rather modest result and also fell below the threshold of 4%, as Line mentioned. Then the third point has been regionalism. This has permeated several issues of the election, and it's partly due to a number of reforms in the health system, and particularly in the justice sector when it comes to the police and the number of police stations around the country. These reforms have created an impression that the countryside is being deprioritized by central authorities. And the unrest around the country has been caught up by the Centre Party, which made a tremendously good result in the election compared to earlier elections, on the slogan that we should use the whole of Norway. So, the second question, why did Solberg lose? She is a very competent prime minister, and she's led Norway in a very good way throughout the pandemics. And we believe that her loss can be attributed to several factors. The first one is actually, very simply, general wear and tear on the government parties. They've been struggling with a number of challenges, and they now seem a little bit out of energy. Secondly, disagreement between the center-right parties has become increasingly evident throughout the 8 years they've been in power, and particularly now throughout the last couple of years. The Progress Party to the far right had already left the coalition on the disagreement, and the Solberg government, if I may, has gradually seemed like a workshop for diluted and unclear internal compromises. No overarching vision or direction. The policies of the government has been what it can agree on internally. When it comes to the Conservative Party, which now takes a great loss, the largest loss for any single party in this election, we believe that they've found it demanding to communicate their own policies. So the Conservatives have been forced into assuming a role of an internal broker between the smaller coalition parties, trying to hammer out compromises, which has made it very difficult for the Conservatives to have a clear profile. It should also be mentioned that during the last couple of decades, there's been a trend in Norway that the government only lasts for 2 electoral periods of 4 years. The same thing happened to the Red-Green coalition 8 years ago, although that was also considered to be rather successful. So what would happen now? I should add that there will be plenty of time to ask questions afterwards. Now, there are some challenges here when it comes to what new coalition we will get, because Labour, which is the largest government among the victorious parties, would like a government with a centre party and a socialist left party, just like they had when Line and I was in government. Now, the centre party would prefer a government with only themselves and Labour, whereas the Socialist Left Party would prefer a rainbow coalition comprising all the parties to the left. So what will happen? It's a little bit difficult to predict, but we believe that despite all these preferences, a three-party government seems most likely. Still, there's one challenge, and that is that the Socialist Left Party is now very heavily pushed, because for the first time they have a large party to their left. And if you call the Socialist Left Party and you have a party to the left of you, you have a challenge. So negotiations will be demanding. The Socialist Left Party is pushed from the left by the Red Party, and there's very few concessions to make. And it might actually choose not to join the government. The Centre Party, on its side, has made a large number of extremely costly promises, particularly on new steps to strengthen the districts at the cost of central areas like the capital area around Oslo, which is the most densely populated area in Norway. And then there are also differences in foreign security policies. So it's going to be demanding negotiations. Our assessment is still that we believe that these three parties will most likely come to an agreement, and that a government will be formed in mid-October. And we also believe that it's most likely that there will be three parties in government. There might be only two. So this is just to show you what will happen now. They're now in the phase of first conversations, as you can see to the right. Then they will go into so-called exploratory talks, then negotiations. They will form a common platform, which is then to be approved by party groups, and there will be an additional challenge in as much as the Socialist Left Party has said that they will send this on a vote among all members of the party. And that's going to be interesting. Anyway, the state budget will be launched on the 13th of October by the sitting government, which means that a new government should be in place as soon as possible after that in order to launch their own revised budget. Now, when we were invited to give this presentation, one of the questions that our host, our colleagues in the Helsinki office asked us is, what happened to the Progress Party, the party to the right, the Norwegian edition of Isäntänään? Now, the Progress Party had a weak election result, but it was still much better than the polls a few months earlier, where they were even actually half the size of what they actually ended up with. And now this decline of the far right can be due to several factors. First of all, the party decided to leave government to build a clear profile before the elections. Now, this strategy didn't succeed very well. In fact, they became invisible. Then the party has been through a change of leaderships, which means that this has also stirred up some internal disagreements within the party on their future course. Should they be a liberal conservative party to the far right, or should they be more of a populist party? Third point is that the Progress Party did not succeed in putting immigrant and refugee issues on the agenda in the same way as they have succeeded before. This might actually have something to do with the pandemics, which has of course led to a great reduction in the influx of refugees and immigrants to Norway. Then the Progress Party was the only party that did not support a revision of the oil tax, which means a new tax on exploration. This actually led to a minor boost on the polls over the last weeks, probably because quite a few Norwegians work in the oil sector. And it's also worth noticing that the Progress Party is still the fourth largest party in parliament, only a bit smaller than the Centre Party, and that in the school election campaigns, the Progress Party's youth did quite well. So I think that it's too early to say that the Progress Party is dying, rather to the opposite, but they are weakened compared to earlier elections. We've also been asked to say a little bit about climate and energy, which are interesting topics. Now, first of all, let's look at the areas where the winning parties agree. Now, they all agree that there should be major investments in carbon capture and storage. Secondly, they are willing to utilize public procurement power to stimulate zero emission solutions. I see that there's a spelling mistake there. It says simulate. It was meant to be stimulate. Of course, the Norwegian public sector is very large, just like Sweden and Finland. So if the public sector starts demanding zero emission solutions when they buy services, that will indeed have an effect on the market. There's also an agreement on future investment in offshore wind. Norway is a coastal state with a long, rugged coast towards the Atlantic. And of course, there's a great potential for building offshore wind parks. There's also an agreement on tailoring the state oil fund investments in a more climate-friendly way through updating the mandate and focusing on investments in environment-friendly technology. However, there are also a lot of issues where these three parties disagree. The ambition of emission cuts, where there's a great difference between the Socialist Left Party that would like to cut 70%, Labour 55%, and the Centre Party, who is more interested in having a differentiation between different industries to prevent the districts from having a negative effect from emission cuts. There's also a difference of opinion when it comes to a carbon tax, and of course in the development of Norwegian oil and gas policy. More concretely, the question of whether Norway should keep looking for new sources of oil on the Norwegian shelf. And then we have investment in onshore wind or wind parks on land, where there's a great difference of opinion, where Labour and the Centre Party would like to see onshore wind parks when that is possible and acceptable for local authorities, whereas the Socialist Left Party is deeply skeptical. Last but not least, we have the EEA agreement. Now, Norway, as you may know, turned down in two referendums a membership in the EU. So instead, Norway now has an association agreement with the EU, and that is the European Economic Area Agreement. Now, the Centre Party and the Socialist Left would like actually to ditch that agreement and instead negotiate a new agreement with the EU, whereas for Labour, keeping the EEA agreement is paramount. It's really a question where Labour has no compromises to make. So it remains to be seen how strongly the two smaller parties will try to push Labour in order to get a change of the EEA agreement. Now, this is what we had as a presentation, and we'd now like to invite you to raise questions.
Thank you, Kjetil and Line, and welcome also from my behalf. I understood that Hannu has been the host when you arrived. We had agreed naturally that we will coordinate 10 minutes before, and then I was stuck in a traffic jam. But fortunately, we have had the chance to hear an interesting presentation, and there's already a lot of questions here, which I welcome Line and Kjetil to answer. If we start with Laura Rissanen's comment or question, how did you see the COVID pandemic and and handling of the crisis, where I think like we have, at least in Finland, we are in consideration that Norway has been quite successful in tackling the epidemic, but it seems that it didn't help the government, at least. How do you see, did this have an effect?
If I can start, it's interesting because the government has really tried the best to, and they've had this, now we really have to fix this because the elections are coming, right? So they have done a great job, but at some point they took it a bit to the extreme because they had press conferences every week, almost every day, and they went very high on the of using feelings, reading up poems, talking about we still have a high mountain to climb, etc. So at some point, the people starting to get a bit fatigued out of that. So in seeing it in all, it didn't make a big role in the elections. Actually, it wasn't a big topic. It wasn't debated very much. So what the red-green parties have kind of used as an argument in their favor has been that a lot of companies have gotten a good payments, like they've asked to get payments in order to make it through the economic crisis, and some of them have made a lot of money, so they've paid out money to their partners, etc. So that does, like Norwegian, the airline company, is one example. So that has not been good, but overall, it hasn't played a big role in the campaign, in the election campaign.
If I could add, I think that the general image of the handling of the pandemics is very positive. Of course, since Norway has this little brother complex compared to Sweden, we always compared ourselves to Sweden. And when it comes to the more brutal effects of the pandemics, and that is the relative number of deaths, Norway has come out pretty well compared to Sweden, just like Finland and Denmark. This is a painful fact, but it's still a fact. And after all, the greatest question when it comes to handling a pandemics is how many people will perish. Secondly, we've had the oil fund, which from which the government has turned up the tap, so that money from Norwegian foreign investments have been pouring into the society, making the negative effects on businesses very handleable. And the government, as Line said, has tried its best to follow the principles of crisis communication. They've been on TV, they've been talking, they've been trying to, show warmth and emotions. Now, that might have been a little bit too much, but then again, no one knew how long this would last. So I think it's a telling fact that the handling of the pandemics has not been a topic in the election campaign at all. So I think Solberg has been very successful. She might feel like Churchill. You won the battle and now you lose the election.
I'm actually taking, I'm a little bit jumping in the questions here, but MP Aki Lindén is here also, because this is linked to the COVID, that was healthcare sort of raised also, that the small patient focus party entered the parliament, if we understood right. Was there a particular reason to that, or was it like a general mood that these kind of issues are important, or was it a regional thing, or what was behind that?
Kjetil, you can start.
Yeah, now the challenge here, and this goes into the discussion of regionalism. Now, Norway, just like a few other countries, have been having a centralization of some of the health services throughout the last years. This is because it's been the assessment has been that larger and more robust health institutions will be able to help patients more efficiently. So instead of small local hospitals, you should go for larger regional hospitals that could offer the full spectrum of health support. Of course, the effect of this is that it takes a longer time to get to hospital. And there's been a lot of unrest, for instance, when it comes to birth wards where women give birth, where they've closed down a number of these and put them into larger entities. And of course, if you have to travel a double-digit number of miles in order to get to the hospital to give birth, that is a source of unrest. So what we see when we now see this single seat for a hospital list, that is because there's been a lot of disagreement on where should these big hospitals, or should we actually have these big hospitals instead of what we used to have, namely smaller hospitals that are more evenly distributed throughout the country.
Yeah, very good. I'm taking I'm leaving Patrick Geyer has a good question about the coalition talks, but perhaps we talk about the parties first. I see trade union representatives here in the chat who are interested in the left party cooperation, and then about the Rud in general, what's the core thing there, which kind of, I think Mikko Hakkarainen is here sort of questioning or asking, what are the core issues that actually differentiate them from other left-wing parties, especially Socialist Left Party, and are we seeing are these people since when we talk about Finnish far left parties further from our left alliance, which is probably very close to the socialist left in Norway, so there is hardly anybody, and the agenda is pretty much the same. You can't talk about a real communist party. Is this something like that, or what's their secret?
Lena?
That's a funny question. Actually, the socialist left is a mid-sized party now, and that's been historically for a long time typically an academic, grown-ups in Oslo, in the biggest cities with academic background, typically vote socialist left. But the Red Party, it's really interesting how they have increased. Before they were kind of looked as, I shouldn't say, but maybe originals is a diplomatic word for it. So not that common that you see those people. But over the years, since Norway has seen that the differences between the rich and the poor has kind of increased, they have grown in strength. And the fact is that if you look at the Labour Party and the Socialist Left and the Red Party, for example, when it comes to taxes, all of these parties have said that they are going to increase the income tax, for example, as one example. And you just see that. So the Labour Party has said that we are going to increase the income taxes, so the taxes on for about 7 billion Norwegian kroner per year. And then the socialist left say we want to increase by 14, so the double. And then you have the Red Party who says, we're going to increase by around 23 billion. So, you have one who is always a bit stronger than the other one, and who's a bit more, not just populist is the right word, but a little bit stronger in the arguments, saying that we are going to stop all the private healthcare or welfare services. We're going to stop the rich taking advantage of the poor and the weak. So they go always a bit further. So, and also they have succeeded in having a couple of front politicians who have become very popular, who've been taking part in TV shows, and who are just, they just more, what should I say, admirable than what perhaps the potential red communist people used to look like. They're young, they are on social media. They look like you and I. So it's interesting. They've really succeeded in gaining popularity.
Probably not like me if they end up like attracting the young.
Well, you shouldn't say, Esa. So I don't know if that really made an explanation. If you would like to add something, Kjetil.
That's actually,
what we've seen throughout the last 16 years. If we look at the long period of time, now all the parties from the Socialist Left Party via the Centre Party and Labour has been in government, and so has all the non-socialist, the Conservative parties, including even the Progress Party. But the Reds have never been in government, so they've never been confronted by the painful compromises that will have to be made. So they can stand up with a clean heart and with ideal solutions without ever being confronted with what did you actually do when you had the possibility to do something. So I think it's actually quite simple. The Reds are strong in labor unions. They are a communist party. They are or a far left party, and they can hold very strong leftist opinions without ever being asked how is this going to be done in practice. And now they can remain so, and they may, if the Socialist Left Party enters government, start to show the hollowness of the Socialist Left Party, which is the poodle of the centrists, whereas the Red Party can keep a clear conscience and remain in the area of fantasy. But still, so someone talk about the wonderful way of how government service disciplines parties. Now, the Red Party has not been disciplined, and they've made a success of it.
Actually, you are probably answering Terhi Tikkala's question here in the chat, who is asking about the role of age, and that was it so that the Rud and the Greens were actually able to attract younger voters, so who are kind of looking for options from the further left or further environmentalism, perhaps, in this case. Would it be so?
I think on that question, definitely the Green Party, they attract younger voters, and they have actively attacked sort of younger voters. But the Red Party, they attract both old and young. So that's, and more distributed among age groups. So that's not just the younger, but what the Green Party failed on was getting enough of the young people to vote. So we actually had a slight decrease when it comes to the amount of the percentage of people who voted. And if the Green Party had succeeded in getting enough of the young people to vote, and also the Labour Party getting enough of the immigrants to vote, because they're just around 60% in the kind of immigrant areas in Oslo who voted, then they would have increased a bit more. So I think in that sense, age didn't take such a big role because they didn't succeed in getting them to vote.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the Green Party that's really interesting, because they are to a large degree a single issue party. I think it's illustrative that when I asked my teenager, who's very preoccupied with climate, why wouldn't you vote for the Green Party, and say, but they only talk about climate. So that has been their challenge. That I think that environmental votes, even from younger people, have gone to parties that have a broader spectrum of policies, whereas the MDG has not really succeeded in building a profile of a party which could really, make a difference on other areas. This being said, it's also a surprise that the environmentalist issues did not lead more voters to the Greens.
But just to add on that, Kjetil, a lot of people who, because the socialist left, they are also very clear on that they're an environmentalist party. So a lot of people have said, okay, my vote goes to the climate costs or to care for the environment, but I will rather put it to the socialist left because I also care about reducing the inequality. So that's why I think a lot of, and also for the Labour Party, they also are on the leftist side, and they also care about the environment and climate, but they're not as strong as the Green Party. So, and you also have a lot of people in the western part of Norway, in the northern part of Norway, who work directly or indirectly with the oil and gas industry. And for example, the Labour Party said, we have an ambitious climate policy, but we're not going to take away the jobs. We're going to change the jobs over to green jobs. So we're going to use the oil and gas. So we're not going to. So that's kind of a scares from some of the people in that region and that kind of industry, that they're going to lose their jobs overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And the MDG has remained an urban party in the south east of Norway.
Mm-hmm.
It's never caught hold of the districts where people fear the effects of the MDG, where people cannot just buy an electric bike and then cycle to work.
We can actually combine here, like our socialist left former minister and currently parliamentary group president Jussi Saramo's question, together with Olli Koski's question about the coming government. Like Olli is here wondering whether there would be possibility for also a minority government with only Labour and Centre. And is there some sort of, how would you comment on the dynamics of a minority versus majority government? And then Jussi is here asking about the possible red lines you were also already mentioning in the last slide about these potential problems between these three potential coalition partners. Will there be very strict prerequisites? How do you pronounce this in English? To take part in the government, like for the Centre and SV?
So those are very good questions. A lot of people actually, or experts, and people we talk to, they think that, especially for the Socialist Left Party, it's going to be difficult because they will actually vote on the kind of platform, the political platform that the party has kind of agreed or negotiated with the Centre Party and the Labour Party. So that they will, in the end, say, no, we will not take direct part in the government, but we're going to have a budget agreement. So meaning that there's going to be a minority government with the Centre Party and the Labour Party, but they will go to the Socialist Left for budget negotiations. We will see what will happen because the Labour Party really want them on board as well. And these three parties have governed for 8 years together before, and that went pretty well, even though the Socialist Left, they kind of lost a bit at the end when it comes to polls and votes. So we just have to see. Then I don't know if Kjetil, if you'd like to add and also take the last question.
There's one thing that Erna Solberg and the coming Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre has in common. They both believe in majority governments. They would like to have a majority so that you don't have first a coalition in which you have to agree, and then you have to go to Parliament to change and get support. But throughout now these 8 years, I think that the right-wing majority government has fared quite badly. It's difficult to have a profile. And a lot of energy is used on actually getting agreement within government. So I think that quite a few parties, including the Socialist Left, have learned that smaller parties in government will tend to lose their profile, tend to get invisible, and tend to get negative effects from compromises where they actually lost. So the Socialist Left Party might think that given the fact that we now have a strong Red Party, it's better for them to stay outside government. But I think that Labour and Jonas Gahr Støre will be very interested in getting them inside, also because they can balance out the Centre Party. Because the Centre Party is going to be a great challenge for Labour, with a lot of costly promises on strengthening or actually transferring funds to the districts.
And I can also add that, because Jussi asked the question if there are any red lines they can't cross. So the Socialist Left have been a bit smarter this time compared to, let's say, the Green Party, who said that we are going to set a date for stopping new oil explorations, right? But the Socialist Left have not posed any ultimatums beforehand, as we call them. So, and they have focused on concrete causes, like we are going to increase the tax, the income tax, or we are going to give less tax to the poorer, or like smaller issues that are going to be easier to get through, instead of saying, like they did the last time, we are going to stop poverty in Norway, which is quite difficult to reach, but they have smaller causes that will be easier to handle. So they haven't really said this is the red line. So it gives them some kind of a little bit more room for maneuvering. But on the other hand, when they're going to put everything, all of this to a vote to all of the members tend perhaps to be a bit more harsher than the people who are sitting at the negotiation table. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think there's
going to be a vote. This is interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a vote for all the members in the Socialist Left. So when we've seen those kind of votes before, we see the people try to become members in order to affect the poll. But I don't know exactly how long you have had to be a member, etc., to be able to vote. But it's an interesting experiment, I would say. And also there was one question that I can just add, like how long the negotiations would take.
I would have come to that, yeah.
Yeah, and we think that usually it's 1 month, and usually the new government will be in place by mid-October. But this time it could pretty easily become a few weeks more. So a bit longer than usual. So mid to end October, I would think the new government will be in place.
How do you see, like there's actually two more more detailed questions. How about like the government ownership steering is interesting. Miss Anna Anttinen here. Do you see changes there, or more active government ownership policies, or something else which would be relevant in this case?
Do you mean by like government owning companies?
Government owning companies. Like, does the government kind of like be even more ambitious? This is a big discussion in Finland. Like when state owns shares, either like majority or like is a part in a like listed company. So this is a forever topic. Like, can the government sort of push its own agenda through the companies operating in an open market? Let's say, like pushing them towards more environmentally sound practices, or being more socially responsible. Then again, like, okay, does the government, the ownership, then like sort of hinder the possibilities to compete in the market for it? And so this is sort of a forever debate, at least here. So I kind of think that this is referring like whether this kind of discussion is relevant for Norwegian perspective also.
I would say so. I mean, some of the biggest companies in Norway are actually partly government-owned or have been government-owned. Like you have Equinor, the big oil, who was previously Statoil, and you have Kongsberg, defense company, is partly government-owned. So that's been success in several areas. And if you compare to Oslo, who is led by the Labour Party, the Green Party, and the Socialist Left Party, they have actually bought like kindergartens, like elderly homes. So they bought up private company-owned, especially within the welfare sector. So I think that this could be that, and the Labour Party has talked about for a long time how they will be more active when it comes to either support tendency to kind of reach the green environmental goals, or to reduce the private ownership in the welfare sector. So it hasn't been a big topic exactly in the campaign, but a lot of these parties have that kind of policy in their programs. So that's something we can expect to be seen. That being said, we had much more government ownership before, and under the previous red-green government led by Jens Stoltenberg, like 8 years ago, we saw actually the other way around. They actually sold or partly sold out a lot of the companies. But since then, the Labour Party, for example, has taken a step more towards left. So, yeah.
I don't think that we will sell off any state shares in large companies, that's for sure. Interestingly enough, what we in Norway call active ownership has not been a topic of this campaign, although I do recognize what you're talking about in Finland, because this has been a part of Norwegian political debate earlier on. I believe that Labour even now will practice a rather distanced ownership or steering of governmental shares in public companies, and we don't have very many companies left where the state actually owns all shares. So we don't have state companies in Norway. We have companies where the state has a share. The only area where I believe that there might be steering signals from public ownership is on environmental issues, green issues, and possibly on issues tied to dictatorships and human rights abroad. But I don't think that they will really go into active ownership in this way, not with Labour being as large as they are.
This is actually a good question, which could be kind of our wrap up also for the talk. Like Stoltenberg was there for 8 years, and Solberg was now for 8 years. Like, is this currently the maximum age a political operative can sort of lead the country? How do you see the dynamic happening? And is there some PM who has been more around than 8 years in history? Like, okay, Labour Party in the old glory days was of course like a permanent government party, but like how does this dynamics sort of work in the future? We are changing here much more often than you are.
Oh yes, we do see, and this is also part of the general trend here when we looked at the parties, that there's a certain tendency of fragmentation. Now the two large parties, the Conservatives and Labour, are relatively seen smaller, and we have a larger number of small parties, right, which are stronger. So, and this will, of course, lead to less stable government coalitions. There was a time, you know, when Labour and the Conservatives together had a large majority, which of course they hardly ever used, but this also made for stable governments. And you're right, from 1935 to 1965, Norway had a Labour government. So we are used to, you know, really long-term governments, just like Sweden, long-term Labour governments, And we've also had long-term and rather stable conservative governments, like from 65 to 71. So and even Gro Harlem Brundtland sat in a decade altogether, although that was broken up by shorter periods of conservative rule. But she came back, so she governed for more than a decade altogether. So Norway, if you look at Norway's history, we in no way have a long-term history of unstable governments. Norway is not Italy. But we've seen the same tendency as in Finland of a growing fragmentation, that governments don't last that long, although we're not changing governments every week, by no means. I mean, Erna Solberg has been there for 8 years. But now people are hungry for something new.
One factor that can be added is that Norway has fixed election periods. So it's every 4 years. It's not like the UK or even I think Sweden, where they can have we can have a new election next year. No, it's every 4 years. So that also creates a bit of a tendency. If now the Red Greens are able to form a majority government, they will likely have a bigger chance of lasting 4 to 8 years even. If they do not, then we might see a shift in 4 years or even before if they lose. But I don't think so, because the majority is so big. But majority governments definitely tend to last longer. And it's a little bit like the US. It's like 8 years, we can give them a chance to succeed unless they fail dramatically within the first 4 years. So
I have one last question, which is my personal question, that one of the potential Finnish coalition possibilities, like we will have the general election in less than 2 years. So is the fact that, like, if there would be a blue-red coalition, will there be a day in Norwegian politics where we see Arbeiderpartiet and Høyre making a grand coalition?
I don't think so in the near future. It must be if Russia attacks us, if there is a war situation or some kind of crisis like that, then yes, that could happen. But in the foreseeable future, no, I don't think so.
Now, the last time Labour and the Conservatives ruled together in Norway, there was a war. Let's hope not. But then I just have to speak my opinion, but I also think that quite a few Norwegian politicians, regardless of party, would agree with me that, although Labour is a rather moderate Labour party and the Conservatives are a rather liberal Conservative party, so they have something in common, and they're also both what should I say, ruling parties. I don't think that they will enter into a coalition because they believe, and I believe rightly so, that this would lead to a rise of smaller parties, particularly to the far left and far right, which would lead to a destabilization of Norwegian politics. I think that Norway is well served by having two blocks.
Thank you. This was a very, very nice and informative hour. Sorry for early wake up. But thanks for taking time for our quite good audience, I would say. Like, these things interest them. There was a social media debate, even small, that why doesn't the public broadcaster organize more events or inform about the neighbors' elections? So thanks a lot.
Can I add just one thing, Esa?
Of course.
Anyone there in the audience who have specific questions concerning Norway related to their business or some of their interests, please do not hesitate to contact us directly, and we can discuss one-to-one if you have specific questions. So it was great seeing you all, and thank you for all of your very good questions.
Privileged to be here, and just like Lynn said, drop us an email if you want more.
Thank you. Thank you for participants and especially for the Norwegian guests of honor. Let's be in touch. Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.